Some people may say that we are living in the golden age of lived experience. Others might say that we are mourning the death of expertise, that expertise is under siege, that there are too many voices, too many people in the chat offering their hot takes and opinions about everything, about life and how life should be lived, about culture, society, and everything. All of it. I'm really interested in the democratized experience of embodiment. Everyone has a body. Everyone has a nervous system. Everyone is experiencing consciousness to some degree. Everyone has thoughts. Everyone has sensations. Everyone gets to report on their experience of what it feels like to be a person. That alone is quite threatening to some of the systems that are in place. The internet, the virtual world, the digital world, YouTube, and all the places where we normal people get to post our ideas and share our opinions about things have opened up the floodgates for a different kind of learning, a different kind of teaching, a different kind of sharing. It's the Wild West. It is largely wild and uncredentialed. And speaking for myself, as the recipient of inspiration and insight and help from regular people, I'm all for it. I have had to sort through, like all of us, sort through the less helpful pieces of information that I've been presented with by life, by the news, by the algorithm, by everything, and build the confidence to do my own lab work. I talked about that when I wrote my book, Trust Yourself with Money, going on 6 years ago, that I made a laboratory out of my own life. In the laboratory of my own life, I ran experiments and tests to see how I could change the way I was thinking about and relating to money. And I continue to do that all these years later. I should probably do a revised version of the book at some point. Or maybe a different book altogether. A book about money from a somatic perspective. But I value lived experience. I also value people who study things. I have 2 master's degrees, and frankly, I had to stop myself from getting a 3rd and a 4th and a 5th master's degree when I was coming up in my younger years, in my 30s and 40s. And frankly, it took turning 50 for me to go, okay, stop torturing yourself with what other degrees you should get. Just stop it and do the thing you need to do. There's a part of me that does feel like I don't have the right to speak on something unless I have a degree. I don't have the right to show up in a space unless I'm credentialed or certified. And in some cases, as we've seen lately, there's a strong argument for that. I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson put it beautifully. He talked about the importance of the peer review for scientists. And he said, listen, there are people focusing on their work for years and years and years. They are investing in becoming experts. And when those people come together and agree on something, you should pay attention. And if someone comes from, the outer realms and says something completely in opposition, those people who are in the credentialed group, they get to go, that's not what we found. And there's no one else in our published, credentialed community who has found that either. In the age of self-taught experts, and even though I have 2 master's degrees, I put myself in that category because my master's degrees have nothing to do with the work I'm doing today, except that they're all part of my story and my experience and the person I am. But in terms of training, no. I talk about creativity, but the truth is, even though I have a bachelor's in communications and a master's in communication, we didn't talk about creativity at all. Anything I have to say about creativity came from my work. 30 years of doing creative work in different spaces, corporate spaces, governmental spaces, legislative, nonprofit, and small business, serving all those folks for 30 years. Anything I have to say about creativity comes from that. It doesn't come from my training. It doesn't come from a workshop or a certification course that I did on creativity. Anything I have to say about embodiment is, well, that's slightly different because I spent a lot of time in a learning community with Luis Mojica and his wonderful people. But he didn't offer certifications. He didn't offer certificates or any paper acknowledgement of a completion of a kind of course of study. He just came to us with his brilliance and said, this is what I've learned. Boop. What do you think? And we were in a learning community that way. So I don't have any certifications to show for anything having to do with embodiment. I have my daily practice for the last 5 years, just like I have with creativity over the last 30. Something happened when I turned 50. It wasn't like a magic bell was rung and I was released from all of my angst around certifications. Not at all. I would say the first 3 or 4 years of my 50s, I was still wringing my hands quite a bit about, well, what other certifications do I need and what other degrees maybe do I need to go get another degree, even though I have 2 master's degrees, because that's not what I'm doing now. But the truth is, my career has always been twisty and turny and windy. I'm a very hands-on, curious person. And if I were to get a degree for everything I've been interested in, I would have 8 degrees by now. I would have a degree in economics. I would have a degree in neuroscience. I would have a degree in psychology. I would have a somatic certificate. I would have a somatic experiencing certificate, which I did consider with Peter Levine's group, the Somatic Experiencing Institute. I heavily considered that. I would have maybe a degree or certificate in trauma healing. I would have a certificate in financial planning. If I had a degree or certificate in everything I was interested in, I would have probably 8, 9, 10 degrees and certificates. And at some point, I had to accept that I am the kind of learner and the kind of teacher who is really located inside of lived experience as a mode. One of the things I'm noticing, because I have a bunch of family members who are close to me, who are therapists and who are in the world of counseling and therapy. And what I love about their world is that there is a requirement for supervision. And so there's a place to say, oh, did I get my hours in? Did I talk to the other people who are talking about this and studying this and thinking about this? I have a more informal version of that, or I have brilliant friends and colleagues who I connect with, not in any formal way, but just because I want to, just because we're friends, just because we enjoy each other's company. And we talk about our own work and we talk about our own experiences. It's not strict. It's not professional. It's just organic and intuitive. In some ways, that was kind of what my work with Luis's community was like. He had a membership, which I think he still has. I was one of the early folks, and when he first started it, and I was in there for a couple years, I guess. It's hard to remember now. And I was also in a 9-month slow group with him and with some other folks who were therapists and coaches. And there was even an artist, if I remember correctly. Lots of different kinds of people were in there. And we just talked. And he held space in his brilliant way, and we talked. But again, there was no certification per se. We weren't learning a kind of we weren't learning a modality. We were learning about trauma and the nervous system and embodiment from someone who had been certified in his things, but we weren't being certified to do those things. We were just learning. So it kind of took a while for me to decide how I wanted to position myself and how I wanted to engage. And also, I've been coached and I've been therapized. So I've worked with people who have had the expertise. And I know what it feels like to be held. I know what it feels like to be supported. And I've also been a coach. The first time I coached someone was in my 30s, more than 20 years ago. And I was a great coach. And I've coached people since then. And I have really helped people. I'm certified. Just because I'm someone with a meticulous approach to ethical helping. And so I'm on the bubble, where I am highly educated and deeply devoted to my own practices. And also I make time to be in spaces with other people, other smart people, and lots of coaches. But I am not certified in the thing that I'm doing. Is there a certification in embodiment? I've seen some. Let me not say much about that. I don't feel the need to pursue those. Let's just leave it at that. I think it's wonderful that people are creating spaces for people to learn in a structured way. But in some ways, those of us who are just in the trenches doing the work day by day are doing the same thing. And we have our own stories about the outcomes that sound remarkably like the other people's stories. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts the other day because, that's what we do. And the podcast is called Know Thyself. And the host is a young man named Andre Dukem. And it's just incredible. And I've been listening to it for a few years now, not religiously, but regularly. The last one I listened to was just a few days ago, and there's a Hindu monk, forget his name, Dandi something close to that. Forgive me. I don't have it in front of me. And I was listening to him and I thought, isn't it interesting how everybody who is engaged in any kind of awareness work, they all say the same things. They all sound exactly the same. We all end up saying the same things because we're walking around in that world. The world of focus, the world of attention, the world of awareness, the world of experiencing, the world of being in the body, leaving the body and coming back to the body. This is where we are. It's like a geographic region, metaphorically speaking. And so the people in that realm tend to say a lot of the same things. Is it like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, where you can just go to your workshops every year and get your credits for continuing education? Not really. I do think it's important to be exposed to other people's experiences and ideas and to connect with people. I do think it's important not to be in a little tiny bubble all by yourself. And there are different ways of doing that. I will say that I have been very hesitant, and I think intelligently so. I've been very hesitant to share publicly what my experiences have been about certain healing experiences that I've had. I'm not a doctor, and at the same time, I have changed my blood work with autoimmune symptoms. I have the body and the paperwork to prove that the things I've done have worked. Am I trying to get sued by whatever, the Association of Medical Thyroid Doctors or whatever? The Endocrinology Association, or I don't know who. No, I'm not. So I don't talk about it. But the truth is, I have done some pretty mind-blowing things for myself with my own body when it comes to autoimmune and hormonal stuff. I found a way out of debt with the help of Dave Ramsey, who I think, this is 2015 that I found him in his world. And man, I was heavy in that space for for the whole time I was getting out of debt, so 2.5 years. I was listening to Dave Ramsey every day for a long time. And I took it as far as I could because there's a certain way of doing things in that world. And I did those things and I got out of debt. But what I found in the ensuing 8 years was that the Dave Ramsey model was no longer helpful when it came to my experience of staying out of debt. It's now been more than 8 years that I've been out of debt. And the Dave Ramsey baby steps didn't really help with that, because the Dave Ramsey baby steps really require you to go get a job and get the most high-paying job you can and just kind of suck it up and do that. And as many times as I tried that, it just was not the way for me to be a healthy human in this world. And self-employment and being self-employed was more important to me and for me. And so I've been at odds with myself at different points in my life over that. So I've had to figure things out on my own. And so it went. But I'm not a certified financial planner. I'm not any of those things. I'm a person who has benefited from making my own life a laboratory and being comfortable with a Wild West approach to changing things in my life. When I hold space for other people, I listen. I listen. Here's what I've been discovering. We desperately want, we humans desperately want a clean, clear, straightforward protocol that allows us to not think too hard, not struggle too much, and follow some steps. And we want to know that if we invest in following these 6 steps, 7 steps, 10 steps, 25 steps, that we will be guaranteed a certain outcome. That is what we want. When someone says, give me a job, I lost my job, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't know who I am, part of what they're saying is, I don't want to be a hunter-gatherer every single day. I don't want to do that. I want an arrangement where I show up, I do the thing you told me to do, and you give me some money and I can take care of some things. That's the arrangement I want. I don't want an entrepreneurial arrangement where I'm out on a limb and kind of responsible for generating my own income. I don't want that. When it comes to healthcare, we have a very similar outlook. I want to outsource the discovery process and the research process to the professionals, to the doctors. And I don't care if my doctor starts his or her day with cigarettes and coffee and sugary pastries, as long as his paperwork is in order, right? That's kind of the idea there. Like, we don't even need the doctors to be well or to have certain habits. We don't need the doctors to be paying attention to their own diets or their own cravings, or we don't need them to go to be down on the mat wrestling with their own stuff. That's not what we require of our doctors. The legalities around being able to speak on an experience are fascinating. I respect the investment of time and money and energy that goes into becoming an expert, becoming a certified person in a space. I respect that. I spent money doing things and I've spent a lot of time doing things. And also, I think that there's some value to being part of a community of practitioners. And that's what people in the academy have and create, even though obviously they have a lot of issues in the academic world and shortcomings. Still, it's wonderful. So when I listen to my favorite podcasts and my favorite programs, a lot of times someone will be introduced as a Harvard educated blah blah blah, or someone who went to Yale or Stanford, and that will give you an opportunity to just shut down a part of your brain as the listener. You don't have to question this. They went to Harvard or Yale or Stanford, or they are the father of this or the king of that or the mother of that or whatever. They're recognized as some kind of superstar in their world. So you don't have to question what they're saying anymore. I get it. Yes, I want to deal with people who have studied things, for sure. I will say, though, that I've also been very well supported, inspired, and taught by uncredentialed folks who are just out here sharing their opinions. They're out here sharing their opinions on YouTube. And I've been held by those people as well. So as someone who's kind of in between, I have been the person with the Ivy League education who wore that as a badge, like, oh, don't forget, I have this Ivy League graduate degree. And then wondering to myself quietly, does it even matter? Because I'm a graphic designer now, which is what I did in my 20s, 30s, and beyond. And I didn't learn how to do this in the Ivy League institution that I attended. I was learning other things over there, and yeah, it's all mixed in the batter together to make me who I am as a thinker. But the direct line between the Ivy League education and the work I'm doing for a living and getting paid to do, there is no direct line. So I had to look at that and make sense of that. And then, like I said, I had to fight the urge to get 8 more degrees and certifications along the way because my interests were so varied and interdisciplinary. Now, at 56 years old, I understand that my lived experience is the source and site for my work and of my work. And I also recognize as an ethical practitioner that it's important to let people know where I'm coming from and who I am. And it's also really important to be careful about the information I share. Because the truth is, if I let people know that I changed my blood chemistry by doing X, Y, and Z, that sounds a lot like a recommendation. That sounds a lot like medical advice. So I have to say explicitly, this is not medical advice. When I talk about money, I have to let people know I'm not a certified financial planner. I'm not a certified money girl. When I talk about well-being and embodiment and sense of self, I have to let people know I'm not a therapist. I'm not that. I think that's okay. I think that's appropriate, given the way the world is. This is how it must be. In some other time and era, I might have just been a wise woman in the village who had something to offer because of because of my 10,000 hours of doing a practice or supporting other people. But there is no real village in that way anymore. And so there has to be other language that accompanies my work. When I tell you I have thought about becoming a chaplain, a career counselor, a trauma therapist, a somatic experiencing practitioner, an SEP, I have thought about so many different, there have been so many different certificates and programs and things that I've looked at in my later life. And there was always something saying, Bridge, another degree. And plus, you're doing the work. You're doing it. What are these other people going to tell you about that? They're going to tell you about the other stuff that they're interested in. And it's fine, but it's not what you're interested in. So that conundrum really held me in a chokehold for a while, like a few years, until finally I realized this is not about finding the right words, and it's not about getting the right degrees or certifications. It's just about using my brilliance on my own behalf. And this is what I encourage artists and entrepreneurs to do. Many times we are hired by institutions and corporations who siphon off our genius for their own benefit. This is what employees give. And that's what's so funny to me. I try to be careful because I think that sometimes it could sound like I have contempt for employees and people who work for corporations and institutions. I don't. What I have skepticism about, and possibly some contempt for, is the way that human genius and creativity and brilliance is used and then diminished and devalued so that corporations and institutions and systems can pillage and extract from the people that make what they do possible. We've all heard these stories a gazillion times of how the regular people are laid off and the executives are preserved and they get bonuses or whatever. Of course, that's not the only story. There are, I hope, plenty of places where the employees are also being well compensated for what they bring to the table, I hope. It's just that a lot of the stories I hear are not that. So if there's anything I have an issue with, it's that. I don't have an issue with people who choose to be employees. I have an issue with the way employees are treated inside of institutions. Where I've landed is that in some ways, all of us are touched by the systems that we are reliant on, whether we're working for them directly or not. I need the institutions and companies and corporations and organizations to continue to exist so that I can get the things I need. Everything's interconnected at this point, and maybe it always has been. How we're showing up inside of our lives and inside of these systems and inside of these agreements, that matters. And that's the work of being in your body in the world as you are. Today, I've recorded several videos that will not be posted because every video I've recorded has been this kind of long, winding road. The long and, well, I don't know. Can I sing that? Is that okay? Probably not. That's probably copyrighted material too. So I'm not going to sing the rest of that. It's been this long and winding road all day. Like I'll start here and I'll just be on this circuitous route thinking about all the things I'm thinking about and talking, and then I watch it back and I'm like, I can't post this. What am I even talking about? Maybe I'll post this one. But yeah, I'm thinking a lot about my own gifts, my own skills, and my status as a person with and without credentials. interesting. I've had a few friends who have been credentialed in one area and working in another. And the credentialing from the area they're not working in is a lot more impressive. So it's hard to let that go. And I always laugh to myself. I'm tender about it because I can relate to it. But I have to be honest, I laugh sometimes when I see evidence of it because I'm like, there we go again. Like on LinkedIn when someone says, oh, I'm an ex-Googler, or I used a former Microsoft or whatever. It's like, I'm not doing that right now. I'm not doing that, but I still want the status conferred by that experience. Is that wrong? No, it's not wrong, but there's also not a linear relationship between that thing that you did and what you're doing now. It's all part of who you are, and certainly you should own it and benefit from it to whatever degree you can, I guess. But to be completely honest, as an embodiment coach and someone in the world talking a lot about embodiment, I'm centered more in my daily practice of the last 5 years than I am in any degree that I can pull out and say, oh, I got this Ivy League degree. I love the idea of that as a kind of traditional Gen X chick. It's like, oh, I got this, but it's kind of corny. And also, I think that's what I love most about these young Gen Z folks. It's like, there's a kind of badassery that they bring to the table where they're just like, listen, there is this, I don't remember her name now, but I watched a video of this young woman who was like, your degrees are not a badge of honor. What do they have to do with what you're out here doing? You know, and it spoke to me so deeply because, again, it's like the physician who is starting the day with cigarettes and pastries. Yes, that person can still go do the work of being a gynecologist or an oncologist or a pulmonary guy or whatever they do, pulmonologist or nephrologist or whatever, endocrinologist, all the things that doctors do. But I have to say, as a person who has kind of taken on the work of inhabiting a place, I'm just as interested, if not more interested, in the folks who are doing the thing than I am in the folks who are studying the thing. I feel like I've just said something sacrilegious, but that's where I am. I can spot my people who are doing the things. Like when I heard the monk on Know Thyself podcast a couple days ago, I could tell he's doing the thing. I can find those people. I can hear them. It doesn't matter what field they're in. I recognize my embodiment folks. I recognize them. They're doing all kinds of different things. But I recognize my embodiment folks because we're all traveling in the same metaphorically. We're traveling along the same kind of topography, the same pathway, the same lines, the same latitude and longitude. We're all traveling in the same place, regardless of whether we're all the things I named earlier that I could have been and could have done. The chaplains, the psychologists, the therapists, the on and on and on, the practitioners, the different kinds of certified coaches, all those people. It doesn't matter where we are doing our work. If we have an awareness of embodiment, you can see it and smell it and recognize it. That's interesting. In the last video I made, I talked about how in order to normalize a new way of being, your way of holding yourself and your sense-making mechanism has to become normalized. It has to become kind of neutral and maybe a little bit boring. And that's so funny to me, but I think it's true. I think you might go da 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 da, and you might have your moment of superhero-ness. Like, I did it. I did it. I paid off my debt. I paid off my house. I lost the weight. I survived this job and I started my business, or whatever you did. I survived. I did that thing. I did that. And you do want to have a ticker tape parade. And you do want confetti and floats and, a band, a marching band. You want that. Interestingly, though, when the parade is done and all the confetti has been cleaned up and everything goes back to normal, you have to figure out how to be that new person. And that has to be anchored in you-ness, YOU-NESS. So I have to live a Bridget-based life in order to normalize the best version of Bridget. I have to do the things that work for Bridget. I can't always adopt the 7-point plan from that other guy. Their point 3 and 4 may not work for me. So I think what's really exciting to me about embodiment work is that it's a place to develop the you-based version of life. It integrates necessarily your own physicality, your own experience. It integrates that necessarily. Let's talk more about that. I want to hear more people talking about that. I don't hear anybody really talking about that. Let's talk more about it. So thank you for being with me on this long, winding road of exploration, exploring embodiment, exploring credentialing and permission and power and work and the right to speak, the right to be, the right to show up, belonging. And keep doing your practice. You probably have heard my podcast by now, but if you haven't, tune into Thriving in Plain Sight. We just do a short practice together every week. And a few years back, I wrote a book called Trust Yourself with Money, where I tell my money story, and you'll see the beginnings of a kind of somatic language forming, even though I didn't have that word somatic at all in my vocabulary, nor did I understand that that's what it was. But that's okay, because we don't need to use the word embodiment or somatic. We have a body. That's what matters. And we're engaging with it with curiosity. That's what matters. And then there's my coaching space, where I work with people one-on-one. So if you look in the notes under this video, you will find links to all those things. I'll see you again next time. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.